China, China, China. It's always China's fault. China sends us inferior goods. They send us bad parts. They flood our markets with cheap knockoff crap. We have absolutely no regard for our copyrights, our intellectual property, our patents. None. They've just flooded us, they've taken us over, and they've completely nuked our infrastructure, our manufacturing infrastructure. It's all China's fault, right? No, actually it's not China's fault at all. And I'm not an apologist for the Chinese government or the Chinese people or anything like that. I'm just calling it like it is. It's not China's fault. China didn't do this to us. We did this to us. And it's not that we did this by buying Chinese parts and Chinese tools and Chinese toys and Chinese everything. It's because interests within our own country, our own businesses, our own industries, our own government, have sold us out to the Chinese. They sold us to the lowest Chinese bidder, quite literally. So here's what brought this on. Here's why I'm making this video. This all evolved over the last couple of weeks, and I had to throw something. It was a post on Facebook that made me say, "Hey, wait a minute! Somebody's got to say something here." So this started, like I said, a couple of weeks ago. There's a company called Broder's Performance, and they specialize in Ford stuff, Ford transmission parts. And Broder's developed a valve body, a Ford valve body. I believe it has a trans brake in it, and they market it, they sell it under their brand. They have their name engraved on it. Very proud of this piece. And it's a beautiful piece. It's a nice billet valve body. And it says right on it, it says Broder's. Big letters, okay? So one day, the owner of this company gets a return, a defective return. So he opens the package, and it's in a box, but it's in a box that's marked Speedmaster. Speedmaster is a high performance or an aftermarket parts distributor based in Australia. They have a location in Los Angeles and one in Shanghai. Okay, so you got Australia, Los Angeles, Shanghai. Right, so you're going to see the connections in a minute. So it's in a Speedmaster box, and he says, wait a minute, I don't package my stuff in Speedmaster boxes. And he opens it up, and he takes the valve body out, and it says Broder's Performance on it. It looks like his valve body, but now when he looks at it closely, he sees that, wait a minute, the tooling marks on this thing don't match my tooling marks. And the font on the letters on my name, that's not the font that I use. It's different. Somebody is knocking off my valve bodies. Well, the valve body was purchased through Summit. Summit carried the Speedmaster line of parts and was offering these valve bodies in its catalog. So was Jegs. And I believe Speedway Motors, but don't quote me on that. I could be wrong. All right, so make a long story short, Mr. Broder makes a video about this, and it starts getting around, okay, that Summit is selling knockoff Chinese copies of his valve body. Well, Summit right away jumps in there and are like, oh no, oh my God, it's a counterfeit. We're getting counterfeit parts from Speedmaster. We're going to take them right out of there. Not only are we going to take the parts off of our catalog, but we're going to destroy these evil counterfeit parts because we can't have them falling into the hands of anybody else. And Jegs follows suit, right? Takes everything Speedmaster related off their catalog, off their website. Okay, now, is it that they suddenly realized that Summit and Jegs suddenly realized that Speedmaster is in the business of copying parts, manufacturing them or remanufacturing them in China and then distributing them through the States? Did they just figure this out because they got this valve body? Or did they know all along that Speedmaster uses Chinese companies to knock off parts and sell them without names in the American market or the Western market? This was a revelation? No. Summit, Jegs, and anybody who carried the Speedmaster line knows damn well all along that that's what they do. The catch here was that for the first time, when they counterfeited the part, they left the original manufacturer's name on it. Right? So it was like a lack of communication somewhere along the line, right? So Speedmaster buys one of these Broder's valve bodies and says, okay, there's a market for this. We could probably sell 4,000 or 5,000 of these things. All right, let's have our people in Shanghai have this reproduced. So the people in Shanghai, they find the vendor that's going to manufacture these things, and they go to the lowest bidder and they say, here, copy this valve body. But instead of telling them copy this valve body and obviously leave off the brand name that's on it, they neglected to do that. So the vendor in China makes this order, this run of these valve bodies, leaves Broder's name on them. Speedmaster sticks them in their boxes, ships them off to Summit, and Summit distributes them. Somebody forgot to tell them to take the name off. They got nailed. And of course, oh my God, Summit, oh my God, I can't believe that we're selling counterfeit parts. Speedmaster's out. No, they knew all along. They knew 100% what Speedmaster does. Speedmaster knocks off American parts, sells them cheap through their Chinese manufacturers or the Chinese vendors. They knew all along. I got started on this because I see a post this morning on Facebook, somebody patting Summit on the back for doing the right thing and taking all of the Speedmaster parts off their catalog. And I checked, and it's off their website. Same thing with Jegs, right? They took all of the Speedmaster stuff off of there because of this, because they got caught. No, they didn't get caught. This time they got backed into a corner. They had no choice because it was an obvious counterfeit. It wasn't just, oh, somebody just happened to come up with a very similar item. No, this was a direct one-to-one knockoff with the name on it. That's why they took the stuff. But legal reasons now they're legitimately selling counterfeit parts. Yeah, no, nobody gets a pat on the back. Summit and Jegs knew all along 100%, just like everybody else, including you and me, knew that these parts are knockoff Chinese imitations. But like I said, they got caught. They got caught this time. And I gotta feel bad for the person, whoever it was in whichever country, that forgot to take that name off, because it's like this was $1 billion mistake. Good for them. We want to blame China for everything, but it's not China's fault. It's the fault of the manufacturers here in this country that farm it out to the lowest Chinese bidder. Now, granted, the Chinese businesses are subsidized by their government. They're incentivized to take on foreign trade and create these parts. The thing about China violating patents and copyrights, and that's nonsense. The patents and the copyrights and intellectual property laws only exist in their territory. So United States patents only exist within the United States and other countries that agree to that. Chinese patents, no. So think about this for a second, okay? You're a vendor. The same way you've got a small machine shop in China, the Ding Dong Providence, and you know they don't speak a word of English. They have no idea. America is just an abstract concept to them. They're just going to work every day and doing their thing, okay? You're just like that, okay? You're a small machine shop here, and China is just an abstract deal. And I walk into your machine shop with a pair of chopsticks, okay? And I say, hey, can you knock me off 10,000 of these things? You know, they're not just normal chopsticks. They have an innovation to them. You look at these things and you say, yeah, of course, hell, I can knock those out for you. How many you need? When do you need them, right? You're not paying attention to any potential copyright violation or patent violation in China. You could care less. You don't know where these things are going. It doesn't make any difference. You're going to reproduce them. You're going to give them back to the guy who ordered them, and the guy who ordered them is going to distribute them in China. Exactly the same thing that happens with parts that are knocked off in China and sent here. Now, like I said, I'm not being an apologist for China or the Chinese government or the Chinese people or the Chinese anything. I'm telling it like it is. We would not have been invaded the way we are, the way we have been, by China if it wasn't for elements within our own businesses, our own industries, and our own governments that allowed this, that perpetrated this stuff to happen. We have been gutted, right? So here, I'm going to say something that's going to be controversial, but if you think about it, you really got to think about it. Step back, okay? Think about it. You'll see what I'm saying. So lately in the news, last couple of months or so, there have been these conflicts here and there, right? One country bombs another country, and then these people do this to those people, and like, real mess, okay? Real mess. Nothing pretty going on there. And there's been all of this talk about, oh, this is going to lead to World War III. World War III is going to happen, right? This is it. This is going to be the big one. No. World War III already happened, and you're living right now in this country in the aftermath of World War III. World War III was an economic war, a war for resources, and we lost. World War I was the first mechanized war. World War II was a continuation. It started as a purely mechanized war, and it ended in technology. It ended when we nuked Nagasaki. Once the nuclear genie was out, okay, and then, oddly enough, everybody gets nukes right after that. Within 2-3 years, the Russians got nukes, everybody's got nukes, okay? Now you've got mutually assured destruction, mad, right? And the arms race and all of this silliness that went on in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. You could no longer have conventional wars. If you had a real war between superpowers, well, that's it. Everybody starts pushing buttons and it's all over with, right? So now war shifted from a kinetic thing, people shooting at each other, to an economic thing. There's a war for money, a war for resources, a war for control. And China has won that war. And if you don't believe me, go to any store, go buy a tool, go to Walmart, go buy a blanket, right? Go buy anything. It's all made in China. In the meantime, our industrial infrastructure has been leveled across this country. There are hundreds, thousands of small towns and cities that are like abandoned. They're in ruins because those are the places that made the zippers and the buttons and the bolts and the nuts and all of the little things, and supplied the packaging for all of these things that were made in this country, all across the line, and they're all leveled. And now it's come to the end. We're at the end game. And you've got places like San Francisco and Los Angeles and Chicago and New York City and Philadelphia. And these places are done. They're toast. They're wastelands. Don't take my word for it. There's a channel, there's a guy called Metal Leo, okay? And he started out as a car guy, a car channel, and now he does these walking tours of major cities, and right down Main Street, right down, whether it's San Francisco or Los Angeles, he's based on the West Coast, and Hollywood, right? All these places that he goes to, and he walks down these main thoroughfares, and literally everything is closed. Everything is closed. Every store is closed. Everything is in decay. There's no traffic on the street. There's homeless people everywhere. It's a mess. It's a shambles. That is what it's like to live in a defeated country. We're a defeated country. Inflation, as it is right now, our manufacturing is leveled. It's a joke. Our money is a joke. We're laughed at, and seriously, we've become the laughing stock of the world. World War II, we bombed everything into submission. Post-World War II, we rebuilt everything. American manufacturing was so strong, we were able to help. Now, after we bombed everybody, we rebuilt everybody. And it was all done with American labor, with American resources, with American ingenuity and know-how and work and sweat and everything else. And little by little, systematically, it's all been taken away from us. So slow that you didn't really even notice it until you get to today, and literally everything is made someplace else. It's a disaster. We had World War III already. We lost World War III. Now, where do you go from here? Because this is where we're at right now. We're at a point where our society, our economy, our infrastructure is all in free fall. It's in free fall decline. It's been a little by 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 a little, and now it's a lot. Right? And it's getting exponentially worse as we go along. Inflation is off the chain. The laws don't really exist anymore. Everything is in breakdown. And this is all because we lost this economic war. When did the war really start? When did it really get going? 1971, Richard Nixon did two things. In August 1971, he closed the gold window to international redemption. This royally pissed off the Arabs because as far as the Arabs were concerned, OPEC, the price of a barrel of oil was 1/10 of an ounce of gold. And once that window was closed, it had to be done in paper, in dollars. They didn't want the paper, they wanted the gold. Nixon slapped them in the face and said, no, we're not going to give you gold anymore. You have to be paid in dollars. And the whole petrodollar, I don't want to go down the petrodollar rabbit hole. But that was an event that happened. That led to the Arab oil embargo. Now, the second thing that happened was, and that really in that same period of time, is that Nixon normalized trade with China, which we didn't have before. China was a forbidden communist government, right? And we didn't deal with the red Chinese, right? So now Nixon was like, no, we'll trade with the Chinese. The Arab oil embargo led to the first invasion, but the first invasion was the Japanese. The Japanese took over our automotive, not just in this country, but the Western world, took over our automotive and our motorcycle industry. Now, the thing about the Japanese was that at that period of time, Japan was more or less a satellite of the United States because post-World War II, yes, we were nice and we left all of their systems and whatnot intact and we didn't like occupy them and the whole 10 yards. But Japan had to operate under our systems. It had to use our banking systems, had to do they had to follow our leader, our direction. So Japan was really a satellite country, more or less, and they flooded us with cars. They decimated our automotive industry. China was just gearing up to follow in the footsteps of Japan. So back around 1979, I think it was. 79, yeah, about 79. I was about 17 years old. And about 2 or 3 miles from the track at Englishtown in New Jersey was an open-air tools market. There was a big tent, and there were tables lined up everywhere, and there were smaller tents around the outside of it, and it was all tools. And it was all Chinese-made stuff. This is all brand new to us. Like we had become accustomed to Japanese stuff coming over, and the Japanese stuff was of pretty high quality. But now it was Chinese stuff. And now we remember the things that we take for granted today as car guys. So things we take for granted: floor jacks, engine hoists, cherry pickers, engine stands, air compressors, air tools, that sort of stuff. All of the things that we take for granted today that pretty much everybody has. Well, at that period of time, like up until the 1970s, that was all hardcore exotic shop equipment. The home guy didn't have those things. When I was a kid, when we needed to pull an engine, a cherry picker, no, only a shop has a cherry picker. We used to chain together poles and rent a come-along to pull our engines out. But now this open air tool market comes along, and they have engine hoists for like $99. They have engine stands, they have air compressors, they have air tools, they have air lines, they have all of this stuff, floor jacks, right? A floor jack was an exotic thing in the 70s. The average home guy didn't have one. We had ramps that we drove. We improvised with bumper jacks and all kinds of stuff. That was normal. Now everybody has these parts. So this open air tool market was mobbed like every weekend. Because if you were in the Northeast and you were into cars, well, this was Mecca, right? Anything you wanted, it was there, and it was affordable. And it wasn't even completely fully Americanized yet. Like a lot of the packaging still had like Chinese words on it and stuff, right? But nobody cared because look, I can get an engine hoist for $99, right? Car guys in that Northeast area would flood this place. We would go every couple of weeks and just buy anything that we can afford. Jack stands. Like these were things that you really, they were around, but they were exotic and they were expensive. The home guy, the hobbyist, didn't have these things until this tent market came along. And the name of that market was Harbor Freight. It was Harbor Freight. The same company that's a chain all across the country that I buy a lot of stuff at, I know you guys buy a lot of stuff at, that was its first location. And it exploded from there. If you wanted to participate, in the car game with tools, well, that's where you went. It was the first step. And like, I remember very distinctly, I'm like, man, you know, this is going to put a hurting on American tool makers the same way the Japanese put a hurting on American manufacturers, you know, car manufacturers. This is going to put tool people out of business. But we also knew back then that there are certain things you just don't buy from Harbor Freight. You don't buy their wrenches. They bend and they break. You don't buy their sockets. They crack. You don't buy their ratchets. They don't work. They're junk, right? Stick with name brands, regular name brands. Craftsman was always my go-to. They were cheap and they were rugged and they were reliable. I still have a lot of 1980s Craftsman stuff hanging around here. 70s and 80s Craftsman stuff. Other people, you know, Snap-on and Mac, right? But the budget guy went with Craftsman. There were certain things you just didn't buy from Harbor Freight, but other things you really couldn't get affordably anyplace else, so that's what you did. Now, I remember saying this is going to kill the manufacturers. Now, at that same time, everything made in China started popping up everywhere. And I remember now, a couple of years later, I'm going Christmas shopping, and I'm in one of the chain toy stores. I think it was Toys R Us. And at that point, I had been like, you know what? American. I'm only going to buy American. I am not going to feed into this invasion anymore, right? I drive American cars. Now I'm going to only buy American tools, and I'm only going to buy American goods. And it was Christmas time, and we're in this, I think it was Toys R Us. And I said, I'm only got my stuff made in America. And we walked the whole store, aisle after aisle after aisle, looking at every item that was on the store. All made in China. Everything was made in China. I remember finding a toy rifle that said made in the USA, and I got all excited. I bought it. Like, yes, right? Made in the USA. But I still had to fill the Christmas tree, the space under the Christmas tree. So I ended up having to buy a bunch of Chinese stuff to put under the Christmas tree. That was the 1980s, and it's only gone on from there. So yes, the Chinese took over the tools, the Chinese took over parts, the Chinese took over toys, and then you had Walmart, and Walmart put every little mom and pop business out. Just a disaster. And the Chinese invasion has been going on now in earnest for 50 years. Really, really picking up speed over the last 20 years or so. Until now, they've got a lock on everything. But it wasn't the Chinese that did it. The Chinese couldn't have done it without us. The Chinese couldn't have done it without people from our businesses, our industries, going over there and saying, yeah, I don't care about this patent or this copyright. Just make me 5,000 copies of this at the lowest possible price. You pay them their money, you take the stuff and you distribute it and undermine all of our businesses, all of our industries. And that is what led us to the position that we're in today. We have lost World War III. Where do we go from here? I don't know. I go day by day. I go day by day. I recognize the fact that, yes, we've been taken over. They own everything. Without Chinese goods, either whole or in part, partially made with Chinese goods, there's no way to exist. So you just accept it, right? That's it. I need a blanket. I know it's going to come from China. I need a pair of shoes. I know it's going to, even if it's made here in this country, it's going to have Chinese leather or whatever. There's going to be something Chinese in there. I know it. And I've just come to accept it, as many of you have. The whole concept of only buying American, support American, it doesn't work anymore. Even stuff that's like made in America, it's not only made in America, it'll say assembled in America with parts sourced from other, you know what I'm saying? It's all a scam. It's all a scam. Where do we go from here? I don't know. If I ran the country, if I was suddenly, they made me the president and I had to, I'm gonna fix things, I'll tell you exactly what I would do. It would be wrong. It would be terrible. It would be terrible. But it would work. Okay, it would work. First thing I would do, my first act in office, is lock down the country. Zero trade in or out. Okay, we don't sell anything out there. We don't take anything in until we have rebuilt our infrastructure, until we've put all of our resources back to work. And we have the same capabilities, the same industrial capabilities we had in the 1940s and the 1950s. No trade. We'll rebuild ourselves. We don't spend a penny anywhere. We don't do anything anywhere under any circumstances, anywhere in the world, until all of our cities are back in shape, until everybody in our country that wants a job has a job, and that we have a currency that people can actually afford to live on, right? That's what I would do. What's my political leaning? You know, right away people say, oh, he's just a right-wing extremist. No, I'm neither. I look at the political parties in this country and I see two wings of the same corrupt, twisted, treasonous bird. It's easy to blame the Chinese. It's easy they're the scapegoat. You know, it's easy to point the finger, but it wasn't the Chinese. It was us. Now what are we going to do about it? I'll see you tomorrow.